A warning to our viewers. What you're about to watch is a true story. The following program contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. April 13th, 2011, 7:42 a.m. Darden, Tennessee. In the back of a pickup truck, wrapped in a multicolored blanket, lay the body of a 20-year-old nursing student. The killers thought she was dead. They'd driven her to the Tennessee River beneath the Interstate 40 bridge, planning to gut her body so it wouldn't float to the surface. But as they pulled her lifeless form from the truck bed, something happened that would haunt investigators for years to come. Holly Bobo moved. She was still alive. What happened next was an execution, a single gunshot to the back of her head. But this wasn't just murder. This would become one of Tennessee's most controversial cases, where confessions were recanted, witnesses disappeared, and justice seemed as elusive as the truth itself. This is the story of how a nursing student's dream became a family's nightmare, and how the pursuit of justice became a question mark that still haunts rural Tennessee today. Welcome to the Shadow Files crime series. Tonight's case will shake you to your core. Take a moment to hit subscribe, drop a like, and please let us know where you're watching from. And now, we begin. To understand what happened to Holly Bobo, you need to understand where it happened. This is 2011 rural Tennessee, a world away from the connected, surveillance-heavy society we live in today. Darden, Tennessee. Population 387. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where your business is everyone's business, and where that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're talking about post-recession America. People are struggling, but communities like this one stick together. They help each other out. They trust each other. This is deep Bible Belt country, where families lived on the same land for generations, where hunting isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life, where men in camouflage walking through the woods at dawn is as normal as Sunday church service. In 2011, cell phones were common, but GPS tracking was basic. Social media was just emerging. Facebook was still new territory for most small-town folks. There were no Ring doorbells, no surveillance cameras on every corner, no digital footprints tracking every movement. This was a place where people still left their doors unlocked, where children walked to school alone, where trust wasn't naive, it was necessity. Everyone watched out for everyone else's kids. But that trust, that small-town security, was about to be shattered forever. The Bobo family embodied everything good about small-town Tennessee. Dana Bobo worked construction, a man who built things with his hands, who provided for his family through honest labor. Karen Bobo was the kind of mother who knew where her children were at all times, who balanced protection with freedom in that delicate dance every parent knows. Their home sat on rural property, surrounded by dense Tennessee woods. Holly's grandmother owned adjacent land where the family would hunt. This wasn't unusual. In Decatur County, hunting was as natural as breathing. The woods were safe. The woods were home. Clint Bobo was Holly's younger brother, protective, typical teenager, the kind of kid who'd rather sleep in than get up early. But he loved his sister fiercely, and she loved him back. And Holly? Holly had dreams bigger than Darden's 387 residents. She was studying nursing at the University of Tennessee at Martin, commuting to classes in nearby Parsons. She wanted to help people, to heal people. In a community where most kids stayed close to home, Holly was planning to make a difference in the world. The Bobos were connected to something larger, too. Holly's cousin was Whitney Duncan, a rising country music star who was just beginning to make her mark in Nashville. Fame was touching this family, but they remained grounded in their small-town values. It was the perfect life, in the perfect place. Until April 13th, 2011. When perfect became a nightmare. Holly Lynn Bobo was born on October 12, 1990, and she was exactly the kind of person small towns are built around. Friends described her as shy but determined. the girl who'd quietly worked twice as hard as everyone else to achieve her dreams. She was an excellent student who'd found her calling in nursing. While other 20-year-olds were partying or figuring out their majors, Holly knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life: help people heal. She was enrolled at the University of Tennessee at Martin, studying at their Parsons Center, just a short drive from home. Every day, she'd make that commute with purpose, working toward her nursing degree with the kind of dedication that made her professors remember her name. Holly was in a serious relationship with Drew Scott. They'd been together long enough that friends were expecting an engagement announcement. Drew was the kind of boyfriend parents approve of. Respectful, hard-working, someone who understood Holly's ambitions and supported them. Their relationship was built on the solid foundation that small-town romances often are: shared values, family approval, and genuine love. The bond between Holly and her brother Clint was special. Despite their age difference, they were protective of each other in that way siblings are when they're raised right. Holly was the responsible older sister. Clint was the little brother who'd do anything for her. Holly was an early riser, disciplined, family-oriented. She balanced her demanding nursing coursework with family time, with Drew, with the kind of quiet social life that revolves around church, family gatherings, and long-term friendships. April 12, 2011, was her last normal day. She spent it studying for her nursing exam, talking with friends, living the life of a focused college student on the verge of achieving everything she'd worked for. She had no idea that in less than 12 hours, her name would be known across America for all the wrong reasons. 4:30 a.m., Holly's alarm clock pierced the pre-dawn darkness of her bedroom in the Bobo family home. This wasn't unusual. Holly was a dedicated student who often rose early to study. She had a nursing exam that day, and she never took her education lightly. The house was quiet. Her parents, Dana and Karen, were preparing to leave for work. Clint was still asleep, enjoying those precious extra hours that younger siblings always seem to get. And at 7:30 a.m., Holly's phone rang. It was Drew Scott, calling from the woods on Holly's grandmother's property where he was turkey hunting. This was normal. Drew often hunted the family land, and he and Holly talked multiple times throughout the day. It was a brief conversation, probably checking in before her exam, maybe making plans for later. 7:42 a.m. Holly made her final outgoing phone call. 12 minutes. That's all that separated Holly's normal life from a nightmare. After 7:42 a.m., every call and text to Holly's phone would go unanswered, forever. By this time, Dana and Karen Bobo had left for work. Clint was still sleeping. Holly should have been getting ready to leave for her exam at the nursing program. Instead, something was terribly wrong. The family dogs began barking frantically, the kind of aggressive barking that means danger, not just a passing deer or raccoon. A neighbor would later report hearing a scream from the direction of the Bobo property. But in that moment, as Holly's phone fell silent forever, nobody yet knew that a predator had already chosen his target, and Holly Bobo's ordinary Wednesday morning was about to become every parent's worst nightmare. As we go into the most chilling details of this documentary, take a brief moment to like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, for more in-depth investigations and analysis of significant cases like this. What Clint Bobo witnessed next would haunt him for the rest of his life. Around 8 a.m., the family dogs erupted into frantic barking, not the playful barking of dogs chasing squirrels, but the aggressive, protective barking that signals real danger. Clint was jolted awake, groggy and confused. He looked out his window toward the garage and saw his sister Holly kneeling on the ground, facing a man dressed in full camouflage from head to toe. They appeared to be having an intense conversation. Holly sounded very upset, heated. The man was doing most of the talking, and she would answer back. Clint could barely make out any words from his position in the house, but the few he caught would echo in his mind forever. Holly saying, "No, why?" Her voice filled with confusion, fear, desperation. But here's the fatal assumption that cost precious time. Clint thought he was watching his sister argue with her boyfriend, Drew Scott. Drew hunted these woods regularly. Drew often wore camouflage. From a distance, in those crucial seconds, it seemed like a couple having a heated breakup conversation. Then Clint's mother, Karen, called the house. When Clint mentioned what he was seeing, Karen's response was immediate and terrifying. "Clint, that's not Drew. Get a gun and shoot him." But it was too late. By the time Clint processed what his mother had said, by the time he looked outside again, he watched in horror as Holly walked into the dense Tennessee woods with the stranger. She was walking, not being dragged, either willingly or under some kind of coercion that made resistance impossible. Clint ran outside with a loaded pistol, but they were gone. In the garage, where he'd seen Holly kneeling, he made a discovery that turned his blood cold. Holly's blood, fresh stains on the concrete, evidence that whatever had happened here was violent. Clint immediately dialed 911, but even that went wrong because his mother Karen was calling from her workplace in a different county. She reached the wrong dispatcher initially, costing precious minutes while the trail grew cold. When the correct authorities were finally contacted, law enforcement arrived at the Bobo residence exactly 10 minutes after Clint's call. 10 minutes. In a kidnapping, that might as well be 10 hours. Police immediately began canvassing the immediate area, deploying canine units to track Holly's scent into the woods. But the trail was already cold, and the dogs lost the scent quickly in the dense forest that surrounded the property. The one advantage investigators had was technology. Holly's cell phone was still active, and cell tower pings showed her phone moving away from her home tower, heading north. The digital breadcrumbs painted a terrifying picture. Holly was being taken further and further from safety, toward Interstate 40, toward places where she could disappear forever. Within hours, Decatur County had mobilized the largest search operation in its history. Hundreds of volunteers poured in from across Tennessee and neighboring states. The story captured national media attention. A beautiful nursing student vanishing in broad daylight from her own home. On April 15th, just 2 days after Holly disappeared, searchers found the first piece of evidence, Holly's lunchbox, discovered in the woods on Bible Hill Road, not far from the Bobo home. Inside was a sandwich and a card embroidered with the letter H, heartbreaking proof that Holly had packed lunch for a school day she'd never see. More evidence followed. A receipt with Holly's name, a school card. Each discovery raised hopes and crushed them simultaneously. Proof Holly had been there, but no sign of Holly herself. But this was 2011. DNA processing took weeks, not hours. Cell phone tracking was basic. Surveillance cameras were scarce in rural Tennessee. The technology that might solve a similar case today simply didn't exist yet. Early in the investigation, authorities focused heavily on Terry Britt, a registered sex offender who matched Clint's description of the man in camouflage. His home was wiretapped, searched, put under surveillance. But despite fitting the profile perfectly, investigators couldn't make the case stick. As days turned to weeks and weeks turned to months, one terrible reality became clear. Holly Bobo had vanished without a trace, and whoever took her was still out there. For 3.5 years, the Holly Bobo case consumed Tennessee law enforcement. Multiple suspects were brought in, questioned, polygraphed, and cleared. Every lead turned into a dead end. Every promising tip led nowhere. But Dana and Karen Bobo never gave up hope. They organized search parties that brought thousands of volunteers to Decatur County. They kept Holly's name in the headlines, kept her face on missing person posters, kept the pressure on law enforcement. Their determination was both inspiring and heartbreaking. Parents who refused to accept that their daughter was gone forever. The case attracted massive national media attention. America's Most Wanted featured Holly's disappearance multiple times. Nancy Grace covered it extensively. The story of the nursing student who vanished in broad daylight captivated the country and brought unprecedented attention to rural Tennessee. Holly's disappearance sparked real change. Her case highlighted gaps in missing person protocols for young adults, leading to legislative efforts that would eventually become the Holly Bobo Act, expanding missing person alerts for people up to age 21. But as 2011 became 2012, and 2012 became 2013, and still no Holly, the terrible reality began to set in. The massive searches became smaller, the media attention faded, the case grew cold. Except Holly's family never stopped believing she'd come home. Larry Stone was just hunting ginseng when he made the discovery that would break a community's heart. It was an ordinary day in the woods of northern Decatur County, about 20 miles from the Bobo home. Stone and his cousin were foraging for the valuable root that grows wild in Tennessee forests. It was routine, peaceful work, until Stone spotted something that didn't belong. An overturned bucket, sitting alone in the woods. Curious, Stone flipped the bucket over. What he found underneath would haunt him forever. A human skull, weathered by 3.5 years in the Tennessee elements. Stone immediately broke down in tears. He told his cousin, "Please tell me that's one of those things they use in school and that's not real." But deep down, he already knew. After years of searching, after countless false leads and crushed hopes, someone had finally found Holly Bobo. When investigators arrived, they discovered partial skeletal remains scattered across the forest floor. Holly's skull, several ribs, a shoulder blade, her teeth. But it was what they found in Holly's skull that confirmed everyone's worst fears. A bullet hole in the back of her head. The bullet had entered the back right side and traveled to the front left, fracturing her left cheekbone when it exited. Holly hadn't just been kidnapped. She'd been executed. Near the remains, investigators found Holly's wallet containing her driver's license, final proof that their 3-year search was over. DNA testing officially confirmed what everyone already knew. The remains belonged to Holly Lynn Bobo. The nursing student who'd walked into the woods on April 13, 2011, had been found just off Interstate 40, in the exact area where her cell phone had last pinged that terrible morning. For Dana and Karen Bobo, 3.5 years of hope, of believing their daughter might somehow still be alive, came crashing down in an instant. Holly was coming home, but not the way they'd prayed for. The question now wasn't whether Holly was dead. The question was who killed her, and whether they'd ever face justice. Here's where this case takes a disturbing turn. In March 2014, 6 months before Holly's remains were even found, arrests began based on what prosecutors called a breakthrough. But that breakthrough came from one of the most controversial confessions in Tennessee legal history. John Dylan Adams was arrested on unrelated weapons charges. Dylan wasn't your typical criminal. He was intellectually disabled, with a mental capacity that made him highly susceptible to suggestion and coercion. During his interrogation, Dylan told police something that would change everything. He claimed he witnessed Holly Bobo alive at his brother's house after her abduction. According to Dylan's statement, he went to his brother Zach's residence on April 13th to get his truck. There he allegedly saw Holly sitting in a green chair wearing a pink t-shirt with Jason Autry standing nearby. Dylan claimed Zach was wearing camouflage shorts and told him he had raped Holly and videotaped it. This confession led to the arrests of Zach Adams, Jason Wayne Autry, and Shane Kyle Austin. But here's the problem. Dylan Adams later recanted his entire confession, claiming investigators had coerced him after keeping him up all night without food or water until he finally said, "What do you want me to say?" Dylan's family insisted he was being manipulated. His mother described watching interrogation footage, where TBI agents would correct Dylan's story. "Don't you mean this? Don't you mean it happened like this? No, Dylan, it went down like this." She could see the moment her son gave up and just started agreeing with whatever they suggested. But the damage was done. Based largely on this questionable confession from a vulnerable individual, 4 men were charged with Holly Bobo's kidnapping, rape, and murder. When the case finally went to trial, prosecutors presented a theory that seemed almost too bizarre to believe. They claimed the motive for Holly's abduction wasn't sexual assault or robbery, it was to teach her brother Clint how to make methamphetamine. According to the prosecution, Austin, Zach Adams, and Autry went to the Bobo residence that morning specifically to involve Clint in drug manufacturing. When Holly emerged from the house screaming and hollering, they made the split-second decision to abduct her instead. The prosecution alleged that Holly was taken to a barn owned by Austin's grandmother, where she was raped by multiple attackers. Then, according to their timeline, the men decided to dispose of her body by the Tennessee River under the Interstate 40 bridge. But here's where Jason Autry's testimony became crucial. Autry claimed that when they unloaded Holly's body from the truck bed, they realized she was still alive. At that point, according to Autry, Zach Adams shot Holly in the back of the head to finish what they'd started. Autry's testimony was graphic, detailed, and delivered with a kind of calm precision that made juries believe every word. He described wrapping Holly in a multicolored blanket, loading her into the truck, driving to specific locations. His story had the ring of truth because he knew details that seemed impossible to fabricate. But there was one problem with Autry's testimony. He had access to all the discovery materials before he testified, meaning he could synchronize his story with the known evidence. The prosecution's case against Zach Adams was built entirely on circumstantial evidence. There was no DNA linking him to the crime, no fingerprints, no physical evidence whatsoever connecting him to Holly's murder. What they did have was a neighbor's report of seeing a white truck driving rapidly on the morning of Holly's disappearance. Zach Adams drove a white truck. They had alleged threatening statements. Adams's then-girlfriend, Rebecca Earp, testified that he told her he would tie me up just like he did Holly Bobo, and nobody would ever see me again. Multiple witnesses claimed Adams had made incriminating statements about his involvement. It remains to be seen how Adams had made incriminating statements about his involvement. They had a gun, an Arminius model HW .532 caliber revolver that was allegedly used to kill Holly. A local man claimed Austin and Autry had sold him the weapon in exchange for drugs. But forensic tests on the gun failed to find any DNA or fingerprints, and prosecutors couldn't link the weapon to the case through ballistics testing. 2 pieces of paper belonging to Holly, a receipt and a note card, were found on the road where Austin lived, with the receipt discovered just 75 feet from his driveway. But perhaps most damning was the testimony of Jason Autry himself. His detailed account of Holly's final hours, his admission to helping dispose of her body, his willingness to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a dramatically reduced sentence. It was enough to convince a jury that Zach Adams was guilty of one of Tennessee's most heinous crimes, but was it enough to convince them of the truth? September 2017, 6 years after Holly vanished, Zachary Adams finally faced a jury. The prosecution had one star witness, Jason Autry. Autry's testimony was chilling. He claimed he went to Austin's house to buy drugs and witnessed the cover-up. Holly's body was wrapped in a blanket in Zach's truck. They drove to the Tennessee River to dispose of her, but when they unloaded the body, Holly was still alive. That's when Zach Adams allegedly shot her in the back of the head. The defense fought back hard. No DNA evidence, no fingerprints, nothing linking Adams to the crime. More damaging, cell phone data contradicted Autry's timeline. For his story to work, the men would have had to drive 106 miles per hour on winding gravel roads. None of the accused matched Clint's description. The Adams brothers were too tall or heavy. Only Austin fit the physical description, but he had short red hair. Clint described long, dark hair. In a stunning twist, former TBI agent Terry Dicus testified for the defense. He told jurors he'd ruled out these men early because their alibis checked out, and cell phone records placed Adams miles away during the abduction. September 22, 2017. Guilty on all charges. Zachary Adams was sentenced to life without parole plus 50 years. Dylan Adams took an Alford plea in January 2018, maintaining innocence while accepting a 35-year sentence. Jason Autry, whose testimony convicted Adams, served only 8 years, released September 2020. Case closed, justice served, or so it seemed. January 2024. The case exploded again. Jason Autry filed a shocking admission. From federal prison, he lied about everything. His entire testimony was fabricated. In his own words, Autry said he added Holly to it, took a real day from his life, and inserted Holly's murder into his timeline. Synchronized his lies with discovery evidence to make them believable. The man whose testimony put Adams away for life now admits he made it all up to get out of prison. In June 2024, the case returned to court. Holly's parents sat in the same courtroom where they'd watched justice seemingly served 7 years earlier. The question now isn't whether Holly was murdered. She was. The question is whether Tennessee convicted an innocent man while the real killer walks free. Did the system fail Holly Bobo twice? Once by letting her killer escape, and again by convicting the wrong person? If Zach Adams didn't kill Holly Bobo, then who did? Terry Britt remains the elephant in the room. The registered sex offender who perfectly matched Clint's description was never cleared by the TBI. Britt had fabricated his alibi, claiming his wife stayed home to help install a bathtub, but investigators discovered she'd actually gone to work that morning before he called and made her leave. The store had no record of the bathtub receipt they produced. Most damning, Britt couldn't be excluded as the source of a palm print found on Holly's car. This case exposes the dangerous pressure to solve high-profile crimes quickly. Dylan Adams, an intellectually disabled young man, was coerced into a confession that led to multiple arrests. Prosecutors withheld evidence, missed discovery deadlines, and charged defendants without probable cause as investigatory techniques. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation briefly withdrew from the case entirely, accusing prosecutors of misconduct. When vulnerable people can be manipulated into false confessions and circumstantial evidence can send innocent people to prison for life, the system has failed everyone, including Holly. Holly Bobo was more than a victim. She was a daughter who called her parents every day, a sister who protected her little brother, a nursing student who dreamed of healing others, a young woman whose kindness touched everyone she met. Her legacy lives on in real change. The Holly Bobo Act expanded missing person alerts to include young adults up to age 21, helping other families avoid the delayed response that may have cost Holly her life. Highway 641 through Decatur County now bears her name, ensuring that everyone who travels that road remembers a young woman whose dreams were stolen too soon. Dana and Karen Bobo continue their fight, not just for justice for Holly, but for truth. Their strength in the face of unimaginable loss reminds us that love endures even when hope is tested. Holly Bobo deserves to be remembered not for how she died, but for how she lived, with purpose, with compassion, and with dreams of making the world better. That's the legacy that matters. That's the Holly we should never forget. And until the truth finally comes to light, her story remains unfinished. If you enjoyed this content, join our community by subscribing and turning on notifications. Every subscriber makes it possible for us to keep creating content we're passionate about sharing with you.